We live in a really great country, but this is a very challenging time. Americans disagree about a lot of things. They disagree about the health care law. They disagree sometimes about national security. But what all Americans have in common is that we live under a constitution. And that ought to mean a lot. It ought to mean that there are basic rules that we all believe in, or that we can at least all relate to. And bringing people together across divisions, young and old, left and right, conservative and liberal, is very critical, because these rules are not meant to apply only to one kind of person. And that seems like a small point, but it's important. It also means that different people with different points of view have something to add to the discussion. And if we find that common ground, I think it's good for our understanding of the Constitution, because so much of what the Constitution is not just judicial opinions, but it's how the public understands the Constitution. So by bringing left and right together, we can have a better conversation that includes more people in the country. It's also important because living through a time of such polarization and debate, it's probably useful for our country to show how on core important issues it is actually possible to bring people together and to have them understand each other. I start by thinking about how much American constitutional law and constitutional principles have resonated around the world. We think of our exports sometimes in terms of cars or computers or software or airplanes, but our concept of the rule of law is one of the most powerful and important exports that America has. And you can see this in how courts have changed around the world, how much the idea of a constitution has come to be so meaningful in societies in transition, whether it's Eastern Europe or elsewhere. And that doesn't just mean a general commitment. It means specific issues and sometimes really difficult legal questions that have come to be understood as bedrock principles of our law. I'll mention, for example, how our criminal law works. Our criminal justice system isn't just prosecutors and police. It's not just superior courts that listen to arraignments. It's not just people who go to jail. It's not just even the lawyers who defend them. It's the rules that they work under. And simple concepts like you have to be proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Every element of a crime has to be proven by a prosecutor. That's deeply meaningful. The case of In re Winship, for example, talked about how there's no shortcuts. If our system is going to be legitimate, every element of a crime has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. That means that the civil justice system is important. Of course, people can have debates about contract law, they can have debates about trade secrets, but criminal law is different. We hold ourselves to a higher standard because people's freedom is involved. And just as it's important to make sure that victims' concerns don't go unheeded, in the sense that, crimes don't go uninvestigated, and that we make sure that we catch people, if we can, who appear to have committed crimes, it's important to hold ourselves to a high standard when it comes to whether that's provable in court and whether people are actually going to be punished. I think it's important to realize that we can face our problems as a country better if we take a step back and recognize what our strengths are and not just what our problems are. And we can find a source of strength in America's capacity to innovate, America's capacity to attract talented people from all over the world, America's capacity to start great businesses, America's capacity to have great universities. But one of our strengths is our commitment to law and our commitment to basic principles, including due process. That if, for example, the government is trying to say something's going to happen to your property, or you are going to have your particular government benefit restricted because of you don't qualify for that benefit anymore, that there has to be some protection, some due process protection that applies to everybody. So I would say the first answer is to recognize that when we face difficult times, in some respects, it's all the more important to recognize the things that make our country unique and special. But the second point is this can affect sometimes the key issues before the country. Certainly the country is facing great economic difficulties, but it's also facing difficult security problems. And those security problems implicate, I think, the need for American ingenuity and determination. They also implicate the need for continued commitment to the basic principles that make the world believe that what we do is legitimate. The times that are difficult really are opportunities. They're opportunities for people to ask, how can we better deal with the problems before us by building on what works in the country and by trying to get past the problems that we faced? So just to give you an example from the criminal justice context, there are some states where people across the political spectrum, liberals and conservatives, have gotten together to say, there are a lot of things we disagree on, and we can certainly focus on those things. But what about the common agreement we have that the less crime that occurs, the better. And if we can save money and deter crime and reintegrate people into society effectively, that's going to leave a lot of us better off. So can we save money in the criminal justice system in a way that is still consistent with our commitment to the rule of law and preventing crime and punishing crime, but reinvest some of that money in education and in crime prevention and things that are actually going to work and make a difference? I think in the same way, when you think about the need for due process in state courts, who are processing large numbers of individuals who might be accused of a crime, I would argue that making sure people get their day in court and have effective representation and are able to validate due process is not a liberal or conservative issue. People might be concerned about it for different reasons, but there's a long tradition in our country across the political spectrum of asking, is the government playing fair? Are people actually being given the rights that society promises to them? And I think part of the work that needs to be done is to remind society through key opinion leaders, people who can be influential in the legal profession or outside it, that we are not alone, that it's not just one issue, so to speak, that is owned by moderates or by conservatives or by liberals, but that we all sort of share this responsibility to make the legal system work for people and to make due process a reality. Otherwise, all these other things we take for granted about society are going to start to change.